Hey you guys, this is Jason from Team Ignis Vanguard. So I have this Tachis deck, and I wanted to make a deck profile on it because it's like the representation of the "look what they did to my boy" meme. So if you saw the title, this is the like the post restriction video. So they made a restriction list, and the main grade 3 for Tachis after the new set came out was this one here a couple months ago, Angerblader. And so there's tons of deck profiles online talking about Angerblader Tachis, but they absolutely destroyed my boy because in standard they limited him to a 1 of. So in premium, which is this deck is I switch between standard and premium, but in premium you can just run as many as you want, but in standard we are limited to 1. So basically it just becomes a deck where you run 1 Angerblader, and then you run basically what we used to run before the new set came out for Tachi. So it is still a good deck, but look what they did to my boy. They absolutely limited him down to 1. So I'm going to explain sort of how you can build a deck around with the new support around having only 1 Angerblader. So first of all, of course, is Angerblader. And honestly, I don't know why they limited him. He's really good, but he's not like limit good. There are cards that are objectively better than him. But basically, his first skill is an act on Vanguard Circle, and you put a rear guard face down as an equip gauge for another unit. So you basically retire one of your units and put it as an equip gauge for another one, and then you can retire one of your opponent's rear guard. So that's his first skill. And then his second skill is an auto on Vanguard Circle. So when it attacks, you counterblast 1, and then you stand 3 of your rear guards that have 3 or more equip gauges, and then all of your front row units get plus 5k until the end of that turn. So it's a really good card. Obviously, you can attack like 7 or 8 times, which is like crazy. And then it couples really well with this other card that's a grade 2 called Sweeperacrocanto that I'll get to in a minute. So you run a 1 of him, and if you're building this deck, which I really recommend you do because it's not that expensive and it's so much fun, I really recommend that you build it and build it with Angerblader. Don't get rid of him completely, because when he shows up, he shows up. I mean, like, he's still a really good card. There's a reason they banned him, or restricted him down to 1, but the main grade 3 of the deck remains as Gigarex. So Gigarex is a card that we got quite a while ago. I think it was in the first extra booster set, and it's been Tachi's main grade 3 until they got Angerblader, and then again, look what they did to my boy, and now we're back here with Gigarex. So in fact, I knew people who, before I built Tachis, they would run Angerblader, and they would run like 4 Angerblader and maybe like a Deathrex or something, or Darkrex, and then that would be it. They would just run like 4 or 5 grade 3s. And so it particularly stung this clan, but you can still really build a good deck. So Gigarex is a good grade 3. So what he does, his first skill is auto on Vanguard Circle. When it attacks, you can put up to 4 cards from the top of your deck face down for each unit that you want to as an equip gauge. So you get to choose. When you swing, you can put up to 1 card on any of your units. So if you have like 4 or 5 units, you can do 4 or 5 equip gauges, 1 for each of them, or you can not do any, or you can just do 1 or 2, you know? So it's a really good way to get those gauges down. And the reason is either to get them down for the next turn or to replace them, because the secondary ability is kind of fun, which is an act on Vanguard Circle. You discard 5 equip gauges. So that's a pretty heavy cost. But then the benefit is if your opponent has 4 or less damage, you just straight up deal a damage to him. It sucks because trigger effects are still active. But it is what it is. You know, you gotta risk it for the biscuit sometimes. But it's a pretty good skill. I mean, this guy can hit some pretty crazy numbers because part of that secondary skill is that of his primary skill, is that he gains 5,000 power for just every rear guard you have. So it's not even with equip gauges. It's just like he's like Alfred in a way, because from like 10 years ago, the old Alfred used to be like you gain like 1,000 or 2,000 power for every one of your rear guards. So he's kind of like a new Alfred in that sense, and he can hit some pretty decent numbers. But it's really the grade 2s in this deck that make it still viable, given that Angerblader, rest in peace. It's honestly worse that they didn't just, like, if they banned him outright, it would be better, because I have to like look at him, and he's always an equip gauge in my games. I always hit him as an equip gauge. So it is what it is. But then the next card you run is Deathrex. He is a triple rare from the first set as well. A lot of people don't run him, and if you don't want to run him in your deck, if you're building this clan, he's sort of a wild card. You could run him or you could not. In fact, some people would just run that, and that would be their grade 3 lineup, just Angerblader and the Gigarex. But I run a full 8 card grade 3 zone. So basically, you can Soul Blast 1. You retire one of your rear guards and one of your opponent's rear guards, and then he'll gain 10,000 power for every equip gauge attached to the unit you retired from your own field. And that is a skill that you can do on Vanguard or rear guard. So it is useful. In fact, I actually was playing a game recently with a buddy of mine, and I used that skill. I needed to get one last big attack in, and so I retired one of my own cards that had like 8 or 9 gauges on it, and it was in the late game, because I knew I was just going to deck out anyway if I didn't win right there. And he swung on like rear guard circle for like 108k or something like that with the other boosted power that he had. So it's pretty fun. So I really do recommend running that. But if you don't, that is understandable as well, because he's sort of like a niche card. But lastly, I have these two. So I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name, and that is going to be sort of a common theme, but the card name will be in the description of the video. I always post the full written deck list, so fear not, I'm just not trying to embarrass myself. But he's on place, or when it attacks a Vanguard, you can put an equip gauge down for one of your cards. So you can place him, put an equip gauge down, swing, and then put another one down for any unit, and that is on Vanguard or rear guard. And he has an Accel gift marker, so if you don't have any of your other grade 3s, you can ride into him. He's a good card. He's mainly used on rear guard. If you're riding into him, the game is not going very well for you. So that is the grade 3 lineup. This is a really fun deck. People always underestimate it, and if you're playing against a person who really knows quite a bit about the game, like, they will still sometimes underestimate it, you know, because they know that you just got restricted. But it is very fun, and I'll show you the reason why it is still fun. Literally, the only reason this deck works at all is because of this card. Here he is in all his glory. His name is Clearout Dragon Sweeperacrocanto. He is super neat, and what he does is auto on rear guard circle once per turn. When it attacks a Vanguard, you can put the top card of your deck face down as an equip gauge for this unit. So he gets an equip gauge when he swings. And then he gets +5 for each of the equip gauges attached to him. And if he has 3 or more, he essentially gains resist, meaning he can't be chosen by the abilities of your opponent's cards. And he gains that power continuously. So good luck getting rid of him once he's got 3 or more, because as soon as he has 3, that's +15, so he's sitting at 24, just always, like, just constantly. Your opponent's turn, he's at 24, your turn, he's at 24, and if he has 3 or more, he has that resist, so it's like, they try to pop you, it's like, no. And that is really good, honestly, against the Narukami deck, which has been meta, even though nobody's been able to see it in the meta because of, you know, the thing that's been going on, the apocalypse. I can't say it, you know, but, anyway, this card is ridiculous. This was the card that I was telling you about when I was mentioning Deathrex. So Deathrex retires a unit, and I had like 8 or 9 equip gauges in this particular game on that card just to get that last really powerful attack down. So he's an excellent card. I'm not exaggerating or joking when I say that he is the only reason this deck is viable, because he is the thing that gets you numbers. He is the card that just consistently swings over and over again. And if you have 1 or 2 of him out and they're reasonably gauged up, and you do get your Angerblader, good God. I mean, this deck is like, with a field with 2 of these, with 3 equip gauges on each, and an Angerblader on Vanguard, I do not think it's controversial to say that this deck is meta. But of course, that only happens 1 out of like 10 games. So this deck is like B tier at best, but it is fun. So the next card is Turbo Smilodon. This is the card that I was mentioning earlier as well, when I was mentioning this card that I will not try to pronounce in the grade 3. They literally just, it's the same ability, word for word, which is that when he's placed on Vanguard or rear guard, you can give a unit an equip gauge, and when he attacks a Vanguard, you can give a unit an equip gauge. So he has a really interesting combo early on, where there are 2 cards in your grade 1 that I run for grade 1s that if you have on the field by the time you ride him as Vanguard, you can get like 2 or 3 equip gauges on them in that grade 2 turn, which is really useful. I'll explain those cards later, but he's good for getting early equip gauges. He's good for adding equip gauges late in the game. I mean, they're just free. It's just plus engages, and it doesn't cost anything. And then the last card that I run in my grade 2 lineup is Megarex, who is my favorite card in this deck, just personally. I love Tachikaze, so he's awesome. And his skill is that when he attacks a Vanguard, and you have to do it in this order, by the way, otherwise that's illegal, and they will call a judge on you. So when he attacks a Vanguard, you can retire one of your other rear guards and draw. And that's the whole first part of the skill. So if you don't have any CB or you don't want to get a gauge, you just retire a rear guard and draw one. And there's even a card that says when he's retired, you can add all the equip gauges that are, or add one of the equip gauges that it's attached to it to your hand. So you can even plus it in that way. And his secondary skill is why it's pretty good, which is that after you do that, you can CB1 and put the top card of your deck down as an equip gauge, and he'll gain 5k for every gauge. So he's sort of like a worse Sweeperacrocanto, which is this card here, but he has a draw mechanic. So there is, like, he is objectively worse than this card, but he's still good, and he can get you draws if you need it. So that's why we run him. And he's also like the coolest looking card by far in this whole deck, except maybe Angerblader. Now this bit is, the video's coming to an end because the grade 1 lineup is pretty straightforward, and then the triggers are pretty straightforward as well. But I have one thing that I'm thinking about changing, that if I get any comments, I am certain they will be about this. I only run this card as a 1-of. So his skill is, and again, this is the reason I'm not saying his name, is because I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it, but his name will be in the comment down in the description. So when he's placed, you can Soul Blast, and then you put an equip gauge down for one of your rear guards, and he'll gain 5k for every one of the equip gauges that he has on him. This is insane because it basically means you can double a Sweeperacrocanto -5. So like if you start out a turn with a powerful Sweeperacrocanto, you can give the Sweeper, which is this card, you can give the Sweeperacrocanto by placing him in Soul Blasting another equip gauge, and he'll get +5 for all the gauges for that turn. So if he's got like 4 or 5, he's already at +20, +25. Then when the Sweeperacrocanto turn comes around, he'll get to attack and put another equip gauge down and get another 5k for every equip gauge. So I mean, he can really swing for like 60 or 70. And the controversial thing is that I only run one of him right now, but I'm thinking about upping that because he's really good. So if you're building your deck, buy a playset of this card because they're cheap online, and just play around with the numbers. This is not the final number. I'm just, the rest of the grade 1s are so good, and there's so many good grade 1s that are in the card pool right now for standard Tachis, that this is what I've come up with, and it is subject to change, so keep that in mind. So the next card is this card, Savage Trooper. I run 2 of. Simple skill, but it's really good in the early game. He just gets +5k for every equip gauge attached to him. So, I mean, he kind of slowly builds up. You know, if you have your Turbo Smilodon in the early part of the game, you can really like start putting a lot of equip gauges down, and you know, he can surprise your opponents pretty early on. You can deal some early damage. He's a good card, and he's a promo, so you can pick him up pretty cheap online. So I just run 2 of them in the deck. And then here's the grade 1 that's really like a necessity. This is Sonic Noah. His skill is that when it boosts a rear guard, you can put the top card of your deck as an equip gauge for the boosted unit. So basically what you want to go for, the optimal rear guard circle in the front and in the back, is a Sweeperacrocanto in the front and him in the back. So you can constantly be giving Sweeperacrocanto those extra equip gauges, and that's only on rear guard circle. And then his Vanguard or rear guard circle is when it attacks or it boosts a unit and that attack hits, you can do the Megarex skill. You can retire a rear guard and draw a card. So he's good for cycling, but the main skill, of course, is that first skill, which is a super good skill. And then the next 7, which are the last non-trigger units in the deck, are sort of a set. So they look similar and they behave in a similar way. So I run 4 of this Zandilopho and I run 3 of these like Laceraterex. You know, I don't know why they decided to make the card name so difficult to pronounce, but everything will be in the description down below. And so this unit, he works on act on rearguard circle. You rest him and you can either choose one of your rear guards and give it an equip gauge, or you can move all of the equip gauges from one rear guard to another unit, which is super interesting. And I'll get to why in a second. And then you can counterblast 1 and the unit will get plus 5k to the end of turn. So that's sort of like a little secondary. You can just give 5k with a CB if you have an extra CB, and it'll break a guard bracket or something. You're playing force, maybe you can do that, but the main skill is really good. So resting him, it gives a free equip gauge, and then in the late game, resting him, you can really move around a lot of, so like say you put a bunch of equip gauges early game on this unit, and you don't want that anymore, you want to move into a Sweeperacrocanto, you can do that, and it's really easy. And then one of the good things about him is you run so many, and he's so cheap to, you know, retire, or, you know, you don't really have to care about him very much. So you can pop him to pay for Megarex's skill, the grade 2 that will let you get plus 5k or draw a card for popping a rear guard and counterblasting 1. Or you can just, you know, pop him with Sonic Noah, get a draw, pop him with Deathrex, get a draw, or you can make him an equip gauge for another unit with Angerblader. So he's just super versatile, and he doesn't really matter that much in the sense of like if you lose him, doesn't mean the world, but you can play him off of other cards. And the reason he's sort of in a set with this card now is because this card's skill is auto on rearguard circle. When placed from hand, put the top card of your deck put the top card of your deck face down as an equip gauge for this unit. So say it's like turn 1, you can call him to the front row, put an equip gauge on him, and then you can retire him later, either yourself or if your opponent attacks him, your opponent's kind of doing your bidding because his second skill is continuous. When it would be retired from rear guard, you can Soul Blast 1 and return up to 1 equip gauge attached to the unit to your hand. So it's sort of like a free plus. You can get a couple attacks with him. You can pay for costs like that, retiring your own rear guards with him, and then you don't really have to, you know, worry about anything because you can attach an equip gauge to him and then get it right back to your hand. So it's kind of like a free draw for the cost of a Soul Blast, because you do a lot of retiring of your own units in this deck, and it is the amount of plays you can do with those 2 cards are ridiculous. So that's the grade 1 lineup, and it is the most subject to change. Like for the grade 2s, for example, you just kind of straight up have to run Sweeperacrocanto. If you don't run 4, this deck is not worth playing. And it's sort of, some people run some Savage Academian, which is another good card, but it's sort of like, I don't think this lineup that I have is too controversial. I think this is pretty much what most people run, but I myself am totally open to hearing any sort of like differing opinions on this grade 1 lineup, because grade 1 Tachis go hard, and there's a lot of good grade 1 Tachis, so you could really go anyway. And then just quickly, I'll wrap up by showing you my trigger zone. Obviously, we run 4 of the draw PG, although now I guess you could consider running 4 of the sentinel crit. That's 30k shield, but this deck needs the draws, so it is good to have draw triggers anyway. And then 4 heals, and then you really could go either way. I'd then do 6 and 2, so 6 crit and then 2 front. You could run all crit. People do that for the pressure. The numbers get pretty big anyway. I think I might do that, but the front triggers do come in handy from time to time. So that's the trigger lineup. And so thank you for watching the deck profile. They really didn't have to restrict him. They didn't have to do that, but they did. And so I haven't seen too many videos going into depth on the new restricted Tachi build, why they built it the way they did. So I thought this video might be kind of interesting. So thank you for watching.